The Arctic Circle was known for its harsh and unforgiving conditions, but for a group of explorers, it was the perfect location for their expedition. They were searching for evidence of ancient civilizations that might have lived in the region, but what they found was something far more sinister. As they trekked through the frozen tundra, the group stumbled upon an abandoned research facility that had been hidden away for decades. Despite the warnings of their guide, they couldn't resist the temptation to explore. Inside the facility, they found evidence of a secret project that had been conducted by a team of scientists. The lab was in a state of disarray, with equipment strewn about and files scattered on the floor. The group soon realized that they had stumbled upon something much more dangerous than they had ever imagined. As they delved deeper into the facility, they found evidence of a deadly experiment that had been frozen in time. The scientists had been experimenting with a new virus that was designed to be the ultimate biological weapon. The virus had the ability to kill its victims within hours of infection, and it was highly contagious. The scientists had been working on a cure, but they had failed, and the virus had escaped containment. The facility had been abandoned, and the virus had been left to die out in the frozen wastes. But as the explorers dug deeper, they realized that the virus had survived. It had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to thaw it out and unleash it on the world once again. The group tried to leave the facility, but they soon realized that they were trapped. The virus had infected one of their members, and they knew that they couldn't leave him behind. They had to find a way to contain the virus and stop it from spreading. They worked tirelessly to find a cure, but time was running out. The virus was spreading rapidly, and the group knew that they were running out of option. Just as all hope seemed lost, they discovered an antidote that had been left behind by the scientists. They administered the cure to their infected colleague, and he began to recover. But they knew that they couldn't leave the virus behind. They had to destroy it before it could be unleashed on the world. They gathered up all the samples they could find and set them ablaze, watching as the deadly virus was consumed by flames. As the group made their way back to civilization, they knew that they had narrowly averted a disaster. They had discovered a deadly experiment that had been frozen in time, waiting for someone to unleash it on the world. But they had also learned a valuable lesson. They had seen firsthand the dangers of unchecked scientific progress and the need to be cautious when exploring the unknown. In the end, the group returned home. Their expedition a success, but forever changed by their experience. They knew that they had witnessed something that would stay with them for the rest of their lives, and they hoped that their story would serve as a warning to others who dared to explore the unknown. The group of friends had been planning their ski trip for months. They had booked a cabin in a remote location and were excited to hit the slopes and enjoy the winter wonderland. But as they drove through the mountains, they could see the clouds gathering and the snow beginning to fall. They arrived at the cabin just as the blizzard hit. The wind was howling and the snow was piling up around them. They quickly unpacked and settled in, hoping that the storm would pass quickly. But as the night wore on, the storm only grew worse. The power went out, and the group huddled together for warmth. They could hear the sound of the wind whistling through the trees and the snow piling up against the windows. Just when they thought things couldn't get any worse, they heard a knock at the door. It was a man seeking shelter from the storm. The group was hesitant to let him in, but they couldn't leave him out in the cold. The man introduced himself as Thomas and said that he had been hiking in the mountains when the storm hit. He had become lost and had been wandering for hours before finding the cabin. The group welcomed him in and offered him a hot meal and a warm bed for the night. But as the night wore on, they began to notice strange things about Thomas. He would stare at them with an intensity that made them uncomfortable, and his movements were jerky and unnatural. As they settled in for the night, they heard strange noises coming from upstairs. It sounded like someone was moving around in the attic. They searched the cabin but found nothing. The next morning, they woke up to find that Thomas was gone. They searched the cabin but found no trace of him. But they did find something else. There were strange symbols carved into the walls and floorboards. They looked like they were from a different language, and they had an ominous feeling about them. As they tried to leave the cabin, they found that they were trapped. The door was locked from the outside, and the windows had been barricaded shut. They were stuck inside with no way out. As the group tried to find a way out, they began to hear strange noises coming from the attic again. This time, they were louder, and they could hear something moving around up there. They finally managed to break through the barricade and make their way to the attic. What they found was horrifying. Thomas was up there, but he wasn't alone. There were other people up there, people who had been transformed into something else. They were pale and sickly looking, with strange symbols etched into their skin. It turned out that Thomas was a member of a cult that had been experimenting with dark magic. They had summoned something from another dimension, and it had possessed Thomas and the others. They had been transformed into something not quite human, and they were hungry for human flesh. The group had to fight for their lives, battling the possessed cult members in a terrifying struggle for survival. In the end, they managed to defeat the cult and destroy the symbols that had allowed the demon to enter our world. As they emerged from the cabin, they were relieved to see the storm had cleared. They knew that they had been lucky to survive, and that they would never forget the horrors they had witnessed in that remote cabin in the mountains. The group went their separate ways, but they would always carry the memory of that night with them. They had been stranded in the middle of a blizzard, taking refuge in a remote cabin, only to discover that they were not alone. But they had also discovered the strength of their friendship and the courage to fight against even the most terrifying of horrors. In a world where death had been conquered, the possibility of bringing loved ones back to life seemed like a dream come true. But the cost of that dream was about to be paid in full. A group of scientists had been working on a new serum, one that would not only bring people back from the dead, but would also cure any disease or injury. The possibilities were endless, and the team worked tirelessly to make it a reality. But when the serum was finally tested, something went terribly wrong. The serum worked, but it had unforeseen consequences. The virus that had been the cause of a global pandemic, thought to be eradicated, had been resurrected, along with the people who had died from it. The virus was far more deadly than it had been before, and it spread quickly. People who had been brought back to life were carriers of the virus, and they didn't even know it. Within days, the virus had spread across the globe, and the world was in a state of panic. The scientists who had created the serum knew that they were responsible for what was happening. They worked tirelessly to find a cure, but time was running out. Governments around the world had imposed lockdowns, and the world had come to a standstill. As the days went by, the number of infected people grew, and the death toll rose. The virus was unstoppable, and it seemed that there was no hope for humanity. But then, one of the scientists had an idea. They realized that the serum they had created had the potential to be a cure, as well as a curse. They set to work on creating an antidote that would counteract the effects of the virus and the serum. The scientists worked around the clock, testing different combinations of the serum until they found the one that worked. The antidote was distributed worldwide, and the infected were treated. It took time, but eventually the virus was contained and the world began to heal. But the scientists knew that they could never undo the damage they had caused. The memories of the pandemic would stay with humanity forever, a stark reminder of the dangers of tampering with the natural order of life and death. The world would never be the same again. Governments imposed stricter regulations on the use of the serum, and the scientists responsible for the outbreak were held accountable for their actions. But it was too late for those who had lost loved ones to the virus. In the end, the scientists had found a cure, but it had come at a terrible cost. The world had been brought to its knees, and humanity had come face to face with the consequences of playing God. They had learned the hard way that death was a necessary part of life, and that there were some things that should never be tampered with. The serum that had once been hailed as a miracle had become a symbol of the dangers of human arrogance. The world had been changed forever, and it was a harsh lesson that humanity would never forget.